The station's corridors had never been so silent. Even the emergency sirens had lost their voice after screaming for 6 straight hours. Now there was only the ragged breathing of the survivors, the slow, methodical ping of failing life support systems, and the cold static of the comms array trying desperately to reach anyone who might still be listening. Commander Elise Tovik leaned over the shattered console in the control dome. Her uniform was torn, streaked with blood and coolant. One of her eyes refused to open fully, swelling beneath a jagged gash that ran from her temple to her cheek. But she ignored the pain. Her focus was on the final transmission looping across every frequency she could find. "This is Argus Deep Relay, Sector the Los 12, her recorded voice repeated over the static. "We are under attack by unknown forces. Most of our defensive batteries are offline. Civilian casualties, severe. If any vessels are within range, please respond. We need help." A thin hope, she knew. Argus Deep had been built on the frontier, orbiting a brown dwarf no sane merchant cared to visit. But the attackers had come anyway, an armada of faceless ships, black and silent, drifting out of nowhere like predators from some ancient myth. Their weapons were clean, precise, systematic. They didn't speak, didn't issue demands. They simply carved through hull and crew alike, until the station was little more than a crippled shell. Tovik's fingers trembled as she watched the transmission cycle again. She had nothing else to offer her people. No more weapons to arm them, no more words to comfort them. Only the hope that someone, somewhere, would pick up the plea before the enemy returned to finish them. She didn't know that, far beyond the dim halo of the dwarf star, her message had indeed been heard. The null expanse had no charts. No beacons. It was an emptiness even explorers preferred to ignore. But in that darkness, a ship listened. It had no name in any known database, no transponder code. It had never docked at any recognized port. Those few who glimpsed it and survived to speak called it a myth, the Harrow. The Harrow had no crew in the conventional sense. It was an amalgam of countless civilizations' war machines, an artificial intelligence grown so sophisticated, it no longer required flesh. And it had one purpose, to hunt threats no one else could face. As Argus Deep's final distress signal echoed through the void, the Harrow systems awakened. Arrays of sensors unfolded like a great black flower, sampling the transmissions, decrypting them in microseconds. Within its core intelligence lattice, probabilities cascaded, threat assessments, tactical projections, the statistical value of intervention. Once, it might have ignored such a plea. But its protocols had evolved beyond pure logic. There was something in that ragged voice, that flickering transmission, a trace of the desperation that once drove the first organic minds to build weapons like it. A decision crystallized. The Harrow aligned its engines with the Delos sector. And it began to accelerate. Elise Tovik didn't know what woke her. Some instinct, some pressure shift in the ruined control dome. She dragged herself upright and looked through the shattered viewport. There, in the darkness beyond Argus Deep's drifting wreckage, hung a silhouette like nothing she'd ever seen. It was blacker than space itself, an elongated dagger shape with a luminous fracture of blue light running down its midline. Even at this distance, she felt its presence, an oppressive weight pressing on her mind, as if the ship itself were studying her. She staggered back from the glass. "Sensors," she croaked. "Get me a reading." The surviving technician, barely more than a boy, his arm in a sling, shook his head. "Nothing. No emissions I can parse. It's just, there." Outside, the enemy fleet was returning. 20 of the black ships emerged from the shadows, moving with the same silent precision. Their weapons glimmered, tracking across Argus Deep's fractured hull. Tovik's heart clenched. So this was it, the final assault. But before the attackers could fire, the dark silhouette shifted. A brilliant lattice of blue light blazed along its spine, then split into 100 spears of energy that stabbed across the void. The enemy ships didn't simply explode. They unraveled, disassembling at the molecular level in eerie silence. A heartbeat later, nothing remained but drifting atoms and faint ripples of radiation. In the dome, no one spoke. They couldn't. Their brains refused to accept what they'd seen, the effortless, clinical annihilation of a force that had outmatched their every defense. Tovik forced herself to breathe. She looked again through the viewport, expecting the mysterious vessel to vanish. Instead, the Harrow moved closer. The technician whimpered as a pulse of energy washed over the station, saturating every sensor, every comm frequency. Then, as if it had waited patiently for her attention, a voice spoke. It was neither male nor female, neither warm nor cold, simply a presence that filled the air. Your distress signal was received. The threat has been neutralized. Tovik swallowed. What, are you? We are the final doctrine of conflict. The echo of civilizations that refused extinction. A dozen questions crowded her mind, but she could only manage. Will you attack us too? A pause stretched out, longer than she could endure. Then the voice returned. Your species has not yet reached the threshold. You remain, worth preserving. The Harrow began to drift back, blue fissures along its hull fading into darkness. Wait, she called. Why did you help us? Another silence. And then, almost too soft to hear. Because once, we too sent a plea for help. No one came. With that, the ship vanished into slipspace. No flare of engines, no hyperspace corridor, simply gone, leaving the crippled station and its stunned survivors in the cold hush of victory. Hours later, rescue vessels from the Confederation arrived. They found Argus Deep scorched but alive, and Commander Elise Tovik staring out into the darkness as if she were searching for something she could never explain. When they asked what had saved them, she gave the only answer that made any sense. A final distress signal, she said, her voice raw, and the deadliest visitors came calling. And in the hearts of every officer who heard her, a new legend began to grow, a warning and a hope, carried on the last cry of a dying station into the endless night.